At that instant, while he was still speaking, the cock crew. And the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter, and Peter remembered what the Lord had said to him. Before the cock crows today, you will have disowned me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. Meanwhile, the men who guarded Jesus were mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and questioned him, saying, and they continued heaping insults on him. When day broke, there was a meeting of the elders of the people, attended by the chief priests and the scribes. Was brought forth their councils, and they said to him,
The whole assembly then rose, and they brought him before Pilate. They began their accusation by saying,
"We found this man inciting our people in Lord, opposing payment to Caesar, and claiming to be Christ the King."
Pilate put to him this question,
It is you who said it.
Pilate then said to the chief priests and the crowd,
I found no case against this man.
He is in claiming the people with his speaking from all over Judea. He has come all the way from Galilee, where he started down here.
When Pilate had this, he asked if the man was a Galilean, and finding that he came under Herod's jurisdiction, he passed him over to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Herod was delighted to see Jesus. He had heard about him and been wanting for a long time to set his eyes on him. Moreover, he was hoping to see some miracle worked by him. So he questioned him at some length, but without getting any reply. Meanwhile, the chief priests and the scribes were there, violently pressing their accusations. Then Herod, together with his guards, treated him with contempt and made fun of him. He put a rich cloak on him and sent him back to Pilate. And though Herod and Pilate had been enemies before, they were reconciled that same day. Pilate then summoned the chief priests and the leading men and the people. He said,
For this man, for me, as for you, I have gone to the matter myself in your presence, and found no case against you, nor has Herod either, since he has been born. As you can see, this man has done nothing wrong against Israel. So I shall have him flogged and let him go.
Away with him, give us Barabbas.
This man, Barabbas, had been thrown into prison for causing a riot in the city and for murder. Pilate was anxious to set Jesus free and address them again, but they shouted back,
Crucify him, crucify him.
Why? What harm has this man done? I have seen nothing wrong that is happening. I let him go.
but they kept on shouting at the top of their voices, demanding that he should be crucified, and their shouts were growing louder. Pilate then gave his verdict that the man was to be granted. He released the man they asked for, who had been imprisoned for rioting, murder, and handed Jesus over to them to deal as with they are pleased. As they were leading him away, they seized on a man, Simon from Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and made him shoulder the cross and carry it behind Jesus. Large numbers of people followed him, and of women too, who mourned and lamented for him. But Jesus turned to them and said,
Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep rather for yourselves and your children. For days will come when people will say, Happy are those who are barren, the wombs that have never
Now with him, they were also leading out 2 other criminals to be executed. When they reached the place called the Skull, they crucified him and the 2 criminals also, one on the right and the other on the left. Jesus said,
Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing.
Then they cast lots to share out his clothing. The people stayed there watching him. As for the elders, they jeered at him, saying,
He saved others. Let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, the chosen one.
The soldiers mocked him too, and when they approached to offer him vinegar, they said,
If you are the Christ, save yourself.
Above him there was an inscription, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging there abused him, saying, but the other spoke up and rebuked him.
Do you have no fear of God and Lord? You will receive the same sentence that this man does. But for our own case, we deserve it. We are paying for what we do. But for this man, he has done what he did. Jesus, remember, let me pray.
Indeed, I promise you, today you will be with me in paradise.
It was now about the 6th hour, and the sun eclipsed. Darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. The veil of the temple was torn right down the middle. And when Jesus had cried out in a loud voice, he said,
Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.
with these words he breathed his last. Let us all kneel. Please be seated. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he gave praise to God and said,
And when all the people who had gathered for the spectacle saw what had happened, they went home beating their breast. All his friends stood at a distance, so also did the women whom had accompanied him from Galilee, and saw all this happen. Then a member of the council arrived, an upright, virtuous man named Joseph, who had not consented to what the others had planned and carried out. He came from Arimathea, a Jewish town, and he lived in the hope of seeing the kingdom of God. This man went to Pilate and asked him for the body of Jesus. He then took it down, wrapped it in a shroud, and put him in a tomb, which was hewn in stone, in which no man would see. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was imminent. Meanwhile, the women who had come from Galilee with Jesus were following behind. They took note of the tomb and of the position of the body. They then returned and prepared spices and ointments, and on the Sabbath day